Hey everybody, what is going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Court Storm College Hoops Talk podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Storm channel. We are your hosts, Kanaye and Josh. We got a lot to get into on today's episode, recapping the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. While there has been a lot of chalk, not as many upsets as we would have both hoped and picked to see in the first weekend. Nonetheless, we've gotten some really, really good games, especially in the second round. So we're going to give you guys some recaps of the games that stuck out to us. We're also going to talk a little bit about our Cinderella's dead, getting back into the chalk, and what's the future regarding tournament expansion, as well as previewing the super, super loaded slate we have coming up for the Sweet 16, which begins on Thursday and obviously has games on Friday as well. But before we get into everything today, just a couple quick messages. First, us here at the Court Storm, we've partnered with Phorm Energy to tell you about all the great products they have to offer, whether it's amino acids, pre-workout protein powders, or any fitness apparel that you might need if you're someone who is active, likes to work out, keep up with an active lifestyle. We'll be plugging their link to their full website in the description box below so you can check out what they have. On top of that, just please engage with the content on this channel in any way you can. Liking, subscribing, telling other people about the Court Storm too. Everything goes a long way with influencing the algorithm on YouTube, getting more people to see other videos we put out. And also be sure to turn on your post notifications so you are the first to see our latest content. So let's get right into it with some recaps of some games that stuck out to us from the first weekend. Josh, I'll throw it to you first. If you wanted to just throw out a game that you wanted to speak about.
I will go with my personal favorite game. I watched this with a close friend of mine in full. This was Santa Clara, Kentucky. I know everyone will say that is their favorite. I mean, we can talk about that another time, but what a just insane performance back to back. It really had everything you wanted in a general, like I'm not a Kentucky fan. I'm not a Santa Clara fan. Like, I come in with no previous biases, like maybe for Kentucky fans that don't like me, maybe that, but I was like, this could really go either way, and either of these teams had a great opportunity against Iowa State. Santa Clara led for quite some time. They looked just like the team I thought they were going to be. I had Santa Clara winning this game, and then it comes down to those final two possessions. And I think that really describes how much we should care about the games in March, because everyone wants to gloss over a lot of games like this in the first round. Like it's not a game that mattered in the long run. Both teams probably would have ended up losing to Iowa State looking back on it. But for a small period of time, it looked like Santa Clara was the team to beat. They had such a great showing. I love Alan Graves. I think he has a great opportunity to get drafted this year. And if he doesn't, he has a great opportunity to be a WCC Player of the Year, if you're going to ask me. He hits an insanely clutch three, no timeouts. Although they tried, and I still wish they had that. And then Otega Owe, a guy that both me and Kanaye had as preseason Player of the Year for Kentucky. We wish he had done better for his season, but made his way over to the half court, hit probably the craziest three. I was looking away, no less. I barely saw the shot because I thought the game was over. It rattles in, and the whole game changes. It flips on its head. Kentucky wins in overtime, and I think that goes to show just the general ability of March. Like this game has nothing to do with brackets, prediction, anything like that. This is a pure entertainment standpoint. And I loved it for that alone. Like, that is such a great game. And for, like, you know, a guy like Otega Owe who needed that shot to stay relevant. Like, he was just not having a great season in Kentucky, and Kentucky wasn't having a great season at all. But they were in a spot of not even winning a game. Like, Kentucky doesn't do that very rarely. And as a 7 seed, yeah, it's kind of possible. You look at it from the perspective of Mark Pope, where Kentucky fans would just raise hell on him if they lost a game like this, and especially in that way. Otega Owe literally could have saved Mark Pope's career right there, and his own no less. I get it, they did not perform well in the second half against Iowa State, and just it didn't matter at the end of the day. But holy, that's the March experience I was looking for.
Yeah, I'm so glad if anyone in Kentucky was going to have that moment, it was Otega Owe. You mentioned how high we were on Otega going into the season. Obviously, I think the expectations were just a little too high. We didn't see really much progression with the three-point shot, but nonetheless, 35 points, a career high. The half-court buzzer beater or near half-court buzzer beater to be able to send the game into overtime would have honestly, like, he might have saved Mark Pope's job with that shot, if we're being completely honest here. And on again, they avoided an upset, which would have looked really, really bad across the eyes of fans in Big Blue Nation. And I just think, I mean, hell of a game. I was really hoping it was going to be a little bit more competitive down the stretch in the OT period. And hey, I mean, I feel bad for Santa Clara. They tried to call timeout after Alan Graves hits that shot, and unfortunately, timeout was not granted to them by the official, and Otega was on a bang home the half court shot. And I just think Santa Clara, they forced some shots over Brandon Garrison, which were not, I just felt not smart shots against length, specifically Sash Gaval. I'm
I
sorry if
mean,
I'm
he
pronouncing
just
your name.
goes
I
by
might,
Sasha, if you want to call him that. He is another player that I
yes.
could really see having a great opportunity in the future, and with Herb Sednek at Santa Clara if he wants to stay there. But I'll let you wrap up that point.
Yeah, I mean, no, it just I think again, Santa Clara forced some shots against the height and the length of Brandon Garrison that were just not smart at that point in the game. I felt you should have went to the basket, especially putting yourself in a scenario where you had to foul down four already. This doesn't improve your chances to win. So good win for Kentucky there. Of course, they were smoked by Iowa State in the next round, but Otega Owe gave us one of the great moments of this year's tournament so far. But for my first pick, I'm gonna go High Point, Wisconsin, man. That was a hell of a game. High Point was hope. We kind of hoped High Point was going to be the Cinderella going forward, but obviously they lost in the second round. But nonetheless, I mean, Wisconsin, I really, really like this Wisconsin team a lot. I picked them to go quite far in the tournament. I believe for our bracket on this channel, we picked them to go decently far as well. And this was just a terrible draw for Wisconsin. High Point, I don't think was properly seeded as a 12. Of course, that's just the situation a lot of mid-major schools find themselves in. But they were so, so talented this past season. And I mean, Chase Johnston, Jack Golke pulling from the parking lot on that fast break. So a heat check of all heat checks was, I mean, hey, you just got to give High Point so much credit. I mean, the way this game wrapped up down the stretch, the job they did in getting the stop on Nick Boyd when he was going to try to take the lead. Again, you just need to give High Point so much credit. And I mean, Chase Johnston, man, he was a potential March legend in the making. I think in my book, he is, even after this one game, just between the heat check shots, the 1 2 point basket, which might have been his first this year
Oh,
on the
what's his
layup.
first, no less.
What's his first? So yeah, I mean, hey, it was great to see former Husky Yusuf Sangare on High Point too, despite him not playing seeing all too many minutes this year. But I mean, listen, we didn't really get many upsets this tournament up to this point so far. Of course, Iowa took down Florida, which might be another game that Josh throws out there coming up. Have to see, but nonetheless, I mean, just to see at least 1 12 over 5, as there normally is 1 12 over 5 every single year. It was good to see in High Point. I mean, listen, it's unfortunate their season ended, but hey, they gave us a hell of a first round duel with the Badgers.
I mean, they gave a hell of a second round duel with the Hogs. So
Yeah.
I will say that this was the Cinderella we honestly deserved to get, but maybe we should have gotten more. I wish they just didn't have to play Wisconsin and Arkansas. Those were the two teams that I felt could have made a Final Four, and they still probably could have. I mean, it's just a great moment. This is like another classic March moment. A team that has never won a game, has always been there, but just never really had the opportunity. They were there last year, lost to Purdue. They were there, I think, 3 years ago and lost as well in the first round. And they get a great comeback in the last 3 minutes. They have the Chase Johnson moment. They have the Rob Martin moment. Like there are names that are now etched into March Madness history from this program. And I think it does make a lot of sense to call them our Cinderella, even though they did not make it to the second weekend. But this is a team that, had they not been in that 4-5 group, they would have made the Sweet 16. And it's a shame that me and Kanaye did not even pick them. We were very high in Wisconsin, even though we didn't have them make the second, even though we didn't have
Had it been any other 5 seed, had it been any other
had it
5
been
seed, I would have.
any other 5 and 4 seed, especially if it was Texas Tech, Bama, which we thought that was going to be the region where anybody could have won, it would have been the moment. And I love that they had this moment in general, because High Point has been here before. Like I said before, they've had close games, but they've never had a moment like this. And I don't think it's just a High Point alone thing. It's a March Madness thing. There are going to be games like this for years on years that'll be just like this. And it is just a classic March Madness moment. I'll give you my second favorite. This one.
Really, really quick.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
before you go on to that, can we just throw a huge shout out to Flynn Clayman, man? He was
definitely.
He was awesome Like, I mean, the speeches he was given that some social media teams put out in the locker rooms, on the court, in the huddle. I mean, that's just a guy that fires you up. I mean, I don't see why any kid at the mid major level wouldn't want to play for him. And you mentioned they gave Arkansas a serious test, and just offensively they were so good. Just kind of came down to them not being able to get stops. But Flynn Clayman, I mean, he's a guy that I think could be due for a big job, maybe this summer even. We'll more on that in another episode of the Court Storm to come. But nonetheless, I mean, that guy, he's I don't see why any kid would not want to play for him. He was awesome in the tournament.
No, he definitely was. And I think there's so much to it beyond like the certain moments you get from the kids and the coach too. Considering he was a
Yeah,
first year coach, no less, I think that's a name you keep around. Obviously, he doesn't go
definitely.
anywhere because that's a program you want to keep for High Point's sake. But like, talk about a tradition that's going to start from this. I think High Point will
Yeah.
remember this win very heavily and expect to hear their name called a few more times in the next decade or two. They are going to be a staple point for a lot of mid majors, and I'm very glad that they got added into this. I guess you could say growing circle of 12 or 13 seeds that play very well in their conferences. Like I mean, like a Macon East, for example, which great game in that one too. But my second favorite is the game after that. That is Nebraska Vanderbilt, another classic gem of a game. This one, I honestly was thinking about number one, but I felt like the first round game was just the first round game. But if you want to talk about just what could have happened or what did happen, talk about Nebraska Vanderbilt. It is such a storyline title game that I think gets under talked about. Not in the fact that the game was great, but what was going in and out of the game that mattered more. This is Nebraska's now second win in March Madness, their first time making the Sweet 16. And for Vanderbilt's sake, it would have been their first time in I think 20 some odd years. They have not had a Sweet 16 in a while. This is Mark Byington's first win with Vanderbilt in the tournament. And just overall great years from both teams. These were two teams that were both in very similar, breakout respects. Both could have got one seeds and up getting the seeds they got. They played good mid majors. They won those games quite handily. And they walked in to an Oklahoma City crowd that literally was just pinnacle bank. Like, I got to give it to Nebraska fans who have never had a damn good thing happen to them in the world of college basketball. They drove 6 hours to OKC. They watched 2 times Nebraska win, and especially in this last game where Nebraska led very quickly, but could not sustain the lead for long. I think that alone was just the crowd work. The crowd work of getting Nebraska to the Sweet 16 should be talked about more because I can't imagine the work you had to go through if you were Vanderbilt to play basically an away game, like a true away game in your
Yeah.
side. And Vanderbilt did it so well. I got to give it to Mark Byington and especially Tyler Tanner to
Yeah.
make their claim to the Sweet 16, which now looks to be very free, if you're going to ask me. And
Yeah.
like, obviously, we can go on end about what would have happened if the shot made it in, what would have happened if Tyler Tanner had done that, and how literally everything could have changed. I still think we had a March Madness moment. I think Braden Frager and Hoiberg on his 23rd birthday and Rink Most and this entire Nebraska franchise deserve this more than anybody else. I love Vanderbilt in general. I think Tyler Tanner, for his sake, should have got that shot, and he definitely deserved to have that after missing one, coincidentally enough, in the same fashion at Missouri earlier in the season. But I think he's a name that's going to get etched down in March Madness history. Like there is so much to take away from a legendary game, and it's just a weird game because I want to feel incredibly happy for Nebraska, but I can't because I liked Vanderbilt a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I feel bad. I feel horribly bad for Tyler Tanner, and I would have liked if the shot made it in. But then that means Nebraska doesn't make their first Sweet 16 ever, and I want that.
These two programs have arguably been two of the biggest stories in the sport this year, where they were this year, where they've been historically as basketball programs, and what they were this year. I mean, they were two of the undefeated teams for, I mean, I think up until week 5 of the season, if I'm not mistaken. And listen, I love Tyler Tanner. Very, very unfortunate that shot did not go in. Very Gordon Hayward-esque if you think back to the Butler National Championship game against Duke. But I mean, hey, that's a major point of argument right there for the overinflation of basketball, as a lot of players and coaches have complained about in every NCAA tournament that we see. But again, I think it came down to the job Fred Hoiberg's defensive system does in just forcing teams to take really, really tough 3-point shots. We've talked about in this podcast before where they cut off the driving lanes, they force you into the tough contested threes. And while yes, Tyler Tanner had a good game on paper, 27 points. Both him and other guys struggled to really get it going from three. The only guy on Vandy that I remember being able to really consistently knock down a 3-point shot was A.K. Okereke on Vandy. I felt he did a solid job in being able to knock it down consistently. The other guys, though, I mean, they struggle because these shots are tough shots, and that's what the Nebraska style of defense forces you to do. But hey, I'm all in on this Nebraska story now. I'm really happy for you, for the Cornhusker fans, seeing their first NCAA tournament win, and of course their first Sweet 16, which subsequently follows that. So, I mean, Cornhuskers, they're here. They're taking on Iowa in what arguably might be the most football NCAA tournament matchup we have ever seen. I heard someone say that they should start with a kickoff in that game.
I heard that one too. That's a fun one. For
Yeah,
to have,
that should be a really, really good game.
to have that as a random rivalry game in the Sweet 16, no less, with both teams, by the way, really having a lot on the line. Obviously, Nebraska has not made the Elite Eight ever, and Iowa has not made the Elite Eight in, like, I think 2.5 decades, not in this century that they've done it. So you want to talk about a storyline, another storyline. We can get to the Sweet 16 in another moment, but Nebraska's sake, they're not just winning one, they're not winning two. They could very well win three, and if they win three, heck, the Final Four is down the road, in Indy. Like, there is a talking point to be made that Nebraska can make a run to the Final Four in a way that we were thinking about they could do, 2 months, 3 months back when they were on track for a 2 seed.
Yeah. Now, for my next game, there was a lot of many different ways I could have gone here. I could have gone with Texas beating Gonzaga in the second round, second biggest upset of the tournament. I could have gone with what was the biggest upset of the tournament between Iowa taking down the reigning national champion Florida Gators. But I got to go with one that I genuinely watched start to finish, that being the St. John's Red Storm taking down the Kansas Jayhawks in the second round, a 4-5 game. This was everything I honestly could have asked for between these two programs. I definitely was leaning towards the St. John's side going in terms of who I felt was going to walk away victorious. Let me say Kansas. They stormed back in the second half when they faced that 14-point deficit. And I honestly thought St. John's was going to be able to close the game out. I felt start to finish Bryce Hopkins was stellar and might have played arguably the biggest game of his career. Maybe not the biggest or highest scoring total he's finished within a game, but nonetheless, just the job he did. The 6 threes he had, timely threes early on when no one else on St. John's could hit a shot from the perimeter. And later in the game, specifically the shot he hit to give St. John's a 4-point cushion when Kansas was making their comeback. I just felt that he was huge in this game. He was active on the glass. He did a great job defensively. Zuby Ejiofor wasn't the most efficient in this game, but I still felt this was a very typical performance we see out of Zuby. We're getting 18 points, near double-double, passing the ball. I believe he leads the Johnnies in assists this year, the job he does defensively. Josh mentioned to this, reminded me of this, I should say, before we start recording today. Just a job that they did getting Flory Badunga into foul trouble within the first 5 minutes of the game, I felt was so key. Getting him off the floor just to be able to take that athleticism, that length, that size that they have down low, to open up driving lanes and being able to kick out to open shooters, which, St. John's struggled to hit their shots from the perimeter early on. But I still felt that what they got at Ian Jackson down the stretch, while he did struggle in the total duration of the game, I felt he had a strong second half. And that's what St. John's going to look to get going forward from Ian. And then from the Kansas angle, it was just for me, I always was wondering, like, where's the point in this game where Darren Peterson decides, all right, give me the ball, I'm going to take this game over and we're going to win. And it just never really happened. If you look at the box score, yeah, he finished with 20 plus points and you might have thought, yeah, he had a good game. And honestly, I think he was a little passive. I don't think he took some of the best shots regarding his selection of the shots he took. And I felt that's kind of been a theme with DP lately, where he's been a little bit of a shot chucker. He's not taking the most efficient shots the way he was earlier in the season. Maybe a lot of that was just him making these tough shots and making him just look so effortless and look like he wasn't even trying. But again, it just, for me, now I think the number one pick conversation has definitely turned towards the DeBonta side following these last couple of weeks that we've seen out of Darren Peterson. But nonetheless, I mean, him going to the basket, getting the foul call, ties the game up. And then Dylan, Church Bells, Darling, Dilly Buckets, whatever you want to call them, 0 for 4 going into the game-winning layup as time expired. And let me say, just the the church bells are growing, as Patino said. So for him to want the ball, to want to call a play for himself, to take a guy one on one and go to the basket with the offhand, it shows a lot of confidence there. And Patino trusted him, and obviously it worked out in their favor. They won 67-65. And I mean, of course, a lot of different games I could have talked about here, but I think I had to go with the one where we saw a buzzer beater.
Yeah, I mean, I love you chose that. I should have chose that as the St. John's fan, and personally watching that game 2 days back was I mean, it was really a weird game because first off, I was coming back from home to here, so I didn't really have much time to watch the game in full. I was on a bus, then going shopping, and I didn't have all the time in the world, but the time I had was the most important stuff of the game. I felt, at least I caught that, but it was weird. It was just a weird game in the fact that St. John's was winning on probably the crappiest shooting you could ever imagine. And
Yeah.
it felt like it just felt weird in the fact that because Kansas would always give up a bad shot or a turnover, or even if they made something, it wasn't like that good. Maybe it was from the free throw line, no less. And then St. John's would not be able to capitalize. So even though they were up 14 at one point, it never felt like they had gone away from Kansas. And when Kansas learned to use their hands correctly, and Peterson played the way he was supposed to the entire game, it became a game at the very end. And I like that it happened. And I especially like that Patino allowed Dylan Darling, who, yeah, had no made points, no made shots. I actually think he made like a free throw or two, but he had no shots on the day that were in. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna just dribble it down the court with 4 seconds left and just lay it up, and that'll be the game. And Patino was like, go right ahead. You have my acceptance on that. And he did everything he said he did. And I love that so much because Dylan Darling has been waiting for this moment for a long time. He comes from a very, small town background. He went to Idaho last year. He wasn't a highly touted recruit. He wasn't a highly touted player on Patino's team. He only really came into fruition recently. And he is the real point guard on this team. I know we keep saying, like, who was St. John's real point guard, especially early in the season when we thought it was Ian Jackson, and then it wasn't Ian Jackson, and now we're here on this point. I think this is firmly solidified who is the primary passer and scoring option outside of Zuby. It is Dylan Darling. I don't know if that's going to be enough to keep them alive against Duke. We'll get to that conversation later as well. But I'm so glad you brought up this game because that's our buzzer beater. That is our buzzer beater for the
Yeah.
season. Maybe we get another one. I don't know. But this was just a great game if you remove the fact that they couldn't shoot well. If you're a defensive guy like me, you love a game like this. I just didn't put in there because I know a lot of people didn't actually enjoy the game. They just enjoyed how it ended.
Yeah, let me say, Gonzaga's probably shaking their head right now, seeing Dylan Darling play as well as he had since he became a starter for the Johnnies as a kid who is from Spokane, Washington. Definitely a guy they could have got this past offseason where their guards struggled this year. But just one more quick thing about this game before we move on. I honestly felt that a major reason why Kansas lost this game was just the supporting cast did not show up. Trey White, Marco Jackson, Bryson Tiller, they did not have good games whatsoever. Melvin Council was a little inefficient on top of the inefficiency that we saw from Darren Peterson. And I felt like it was kind of just all the lack of connection and team chemistry that we've seen the last couple of weeks coming together to fruition. This is really kind of what summed up. I feel like this outcome has summed up what the last couple of weeks have been for the Jayhawks. And honestly, we both still felt that Darren Peterson makes Kansas better in the long term, even going into the NCAA tournament when they had struggled over the last several games heading into postseason play. But honestly, now I think there's a real conversation to be had that maybe they could have won this game had they just continued going on the run that they were going on without Darren Peterson. But let's move forward now. Now that we've talked and recapped about some of our favorite games from this past weekend, let's talk a little bit more big picture stuff. Are Cinderella's dead? And what is to be expected if the NCAA tournament does expand? Let's start with Cinderella's. Let's start with chalk. This year is starting to look a lot like last year. Maybe not to the fullest extent, but I mean, I believe on the second day of the tournament, every favorite in it going into every game won. And, honestly, I think the two biggest upsets that we've probably seen so far are, I guess, High Point over Arkansas, Iowa taking down Florida, and Texas taking down Gonzaga. So you have, only one double-digit seed in the Sweet 16 now, and the next highest is a 9. Now, I'm sure Josh can speak to length on this, but are you in the boat where you just feel that the NIL and the transfer portal just completely killed our chances of seeing Cinderellas going forward?
Yes and no. I think there are levels to this where the portal, and I think we said this at the start of last season when, or not the start of last season, but the start of this season where, we came off of the chalkiest March Madness in a long, long time. It is less chalky than this year, so that is a good thing, but it is still quite chalky. And if you're going to ask me right now, I would still say that NIL was beneficial. I said it back then. I still think it is. But I do think from the mid-major standpoint, it has not been, especially for the weaker mid-major programs. Like, let's talk the tape right here. McNeese and High Point are not the mid-majors that Wright State and Furman are. That is very simply different cases. They are better schools of producing basketball. They have bigger budgets. They are just bigger schools. You've seen High Point University. That's not a school. That's a top school right there. They just are in a small conference, and they've just been in a small conference their entire time. Like in the mid majors that did well, the St. Louis's, the Utah States, they have great NIL budgets. Those are not Cinderellas unless they make like the second weekend, which VCU and St. Louis had chances. They just ran into buzzsaws, obviously. And I think for that standpoint, unless we get high level mid majors, we're not going to get many Cinderellas. But look at the Siena game. Look at the Wright State game. Look at the Furman game. Look at the Kennesaw State game. Look at the Hofstra game in the first half. There are 5 to 10 games that I could point out, and I already kind of did now saying that, where a few different possessions removes this argument altogether. Like imagine if Siena won that game. They didn't brick as many shots as they did. They had a 6th or 7th man in there instead of starting all 5 for whatever reason. I didn't watch the game at all, but I know that that's how McNamara plays the Siena team. It's kind of random, but it was working really well. What if Hofstra kept strong? What if Akron didn't blow a late lead, or Wright State doing the same thing too, or Kennesaw State sticking with Gonzaga, or what if Furman just didn't have the Terrace Reed issue? What if Terrace Reed wasn't on his A game and didn't have a 2020 game, nearly 30-20 game, no less?
Was there
Yeah, it was. Oh my goodness, I didn't even realize it was.
31-27?
That is crazy. Yeah, that's crazy. He nearly had a 30-30 game. Imagine if it was a 2020 game. Furman could have won that, no less. So I really feel like we were a few possessions and a few missed chances, per se, from a few upsets, and we don't need that many. If Hofstra won their game, if Wright State won their game, and everybody else lost, like literally one of those games I talked about happened, and we removed everybody else, and they also lost, we're not having the conversation of the mid-majors are dead. So I feel like it's a yes and a no in that we just got unlucky and the matches weren't correct, or like a few things were incorrect, but it's waning. It's waning for sure, because you look at 2023, you look at 2022, you look at like the past decade has had a ton of random upsets. I think in a weird way where righting the wrongs, I don't want to put it like that, but keep in mind that before 2018 there were no 16 seeds, and then from 2021 to 2023 there were 3 15 seeds in the Sweet 16 and won the goddamn Elite 8. Like, you can't expect that level of consistency at the mid-major level to continue. So it's definitely heaps and bits of different things, but for yes and no reasons, I will say that we are leaning towards a less Cinderella-y March Madness, but there are opportunities where maybe once every 3 to 5 years we get not a 2023, but maybe like a 2022, 2024, which was even, not crazy chalky. There were a ton of 11 seeds. We had NC State, we had Oakland. Like, Cinderellas aren't dead, but the clock is at 11:30 and not 11 o'clock. Like, that's where my brain is at. Right?
Yeah, I think there definitely need to be some structural changes with how the NCAA transfer portal works in order to prevent the Cinderellas from being completely dead. I think someone brought up a great point. I forget who it was off the top of my head, but the Siena Duke game, I love that you mentioned that, because that's a perfect example. When mid-major teams go on runs in the NCAA tournament, or say, they're playing top seed in the tournament. That's an audition for both the coach and the players on that mid-major squad. We already saw with Jerry McNamara. He got the Syracuse job. I don't know what better of an audition he could have put out there with nearly being able to take down the number one overall seed in the tournament with a five-man rotation. I understand that he only had 7 scholarship players available, and the 2 on the bench were sub 35% shooters from the floor this year. But nonetheless, I mean, Gavin Doty, the I forget the big on Siena. Those 2 guys could very well end up at high major programs. They might follow GMAC to Cuse. They might go somewhere else. Yeah, I would think they follow GMAC. But nonetheless, I mean, yeah, that Siena program, they're going to be set back probably years now between the loss of both their head coach and probably their 2 best players. So it's tough. We see this a lot. There's not as much discourse surrounding coaches leaving the mid-major level and taking a jump up to the Power 5 level. And what that does to programs where they're in scramble mode trying to find a new leader that has to come in and build a culture. And who's to say that they just won't go elsewhere too if they find any semblance of success at that mid-major school. So I think for one, I want to see more people take the shirts route. That's a big thing. Building culture at the mid-major level, I think, is something that I respect so much. And Josh Schertz, I mean, signing that extension to stay with the Billikens is just incredible. I have so much respect for him in that decision. But on top of that, I believe that if a mid-major player chooses to transfer to a Power 5 program, that Power 5 program should pay that mid-major school a portion of what they're expecting to pay the player that they got from that mid-major program. And I just think that's going to help to balance things out. I think that's going to give these mid-major schools the opportunity to go and attract some talented guys that maybe didn't play too much at the Power 5 level. Maybe someone who was a former 4-star, former 5-star who just didn't play as much as they thought they were going to, or maybe just didn't work out playing or making that jump from high school to college. And then they have that extra surplus of money from their lost players from that were paid by where they get a transfer, I guess, payment from the Power 5 school to one, upgrade their facilities, to make their school more attractive so that these guys don't feel like they're dropping down a huge level going to the mid-major ranks, but also just to be able to attract this talent and pay them in the first place with the NIL deals and packages that they could set up for their players. So listen, there's a lot of ways that the NCAA could go about this. I don't think there's one necessarily like set solution that could be implemented right away to just completely erase the problems of the chalk that we've seen the last 2 years now in March Madness. But I think having some aspects of what I just spoke about implemented into how the transfer portal and NIL works, I think will help to remedy some of the problems at a minimum.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to it in my mind. And I mean, I've said my thoughts before. I'll say them again just to, I guess, reprise. But they're not dead. They still come back. But there needs to be a lot of work done for NCAA. They need to put more effort in NIL to allow for these programs to rebuild when their main players are lost and when their coaches are lost. And I think it also does come down to mid-major traditions. Like I mentioned before, how High Point is going to build a tradition off of this win. McNeese built a tradition off their win last year. We need programs to get, opportunities at winning in March. Simple enough. They need to be able to have these chances because I think, for Hofstra's standpoint, for example, win or lose, I think they built a tradition right there. They built a tradition because they went back for the first time in 20 years. And I think they'll be back again sooner rather than later with Speedy Claxton to make sure that becomes reality. And yeah, maybe that means that there are not less good mid majors, but less like inconsistent mid majors, if you get what I'm saying. Like it's nice when you get an Idaho who hasn't been to the tournament since the 80s, but those teams don't win typically. The teams that do win are the capable mid majors that have been there before. In all reality, we just need to have programs like that keep up with it and also don't lose in their conference tournaments. Like keep in mind, we were forfeited out of a great Belmont, a great Yale, a great Liberty, Sam Houston State, like I think Navy, Merrimack, like a ton of 1 seeds lost. They lost in very awkward ways that you wouldn't expected. Like they didn't have the opportunities that they should have had, I guess.
I think a lot of that falls on the lines of just some of these mid-major conference tournaments, their structures need to be changed where they more so work to the benefit of the top teams in their respective leagues. Where, I mean, hey, a lot of these, top seeds in these mid-major conference tournaments, they got to play like 4 games in 4 days, some 5 games in 5 days. There's no buys. It's a lot. And to ask a team to do that after having as successful of a year as we saw some of the teams that lost in their conference tournaments that probably should have been in from the mid majors, it's tough. And that obviously leads to what you talked about, and then us not seeing the potential best mid major candidates in the big dance. But now let's get into some NCAA tournament expansion talk. Of course, this is something that circulates across all college basketball news and media every single year. And of course, it has once again this tournament season. I'm just going to come out right away. Shouldn't do it. Always felt this way. Never will change on where I stand. Just why ruin something that's already fine as it is?
Yeah, I'll never understand it why they want to do it, especially now this year, because they're supposed to. The rumor that is growing right now is that the NCAA after this tournament is going to sit down in midsummer and they're going to hammer together a 76 team March Madness. Not 72, 76. I've done the paperwork before. That is 8 more bubble teams. If you take the 8 bubble teams that were out this year, none of them are winning a game. Like, I get this is the worst bubble that we've had in a damn long time, but this bubble, if this was this year, this bubble would have then included Oklahoma, San Diego State, New Mexico, Auburn with 16 losses. It maybe would have included Belmont. It maybe would have included South Florida with like if they lost the American. It might include like 2, maybe 3 mid-majors that wouldn't have made it every other year. But when you're having, what would that now be, like 16 play-in teams? Yes, 16 play-in teams. I think it just breeds disaster for not just teams that are living on the bubble, but teams have to play them, because for the teams on the bubble, it's not a justification to make it in. Like, think about how many years recently, I should say, that Porter Moser at Oklahoma has just barely snuck in or snuck out of the bubble. And in that scenario, teams like them with coaches like Moser would stick around longer. And for all intents and purposes, Moser shouldn't be coaching at Oklahoma. He's not that good. Oklahoma needs something better, and they can't settle for that. But they would be settling for that if every year they were a play-in team in Dayton, because the bubble expanded. Same thing with like half the mid-major teams that just get good years and they want to give away their coach because, he looked great and now all the high majors want him. Like because he made the tournament as a 10 seed and got put in Dayton and then lost in the first round to a, good 7 seed. And for that standpoint as well, could you imagine the average 6 or 7 seed experience where you literally could play one of 16 teams? You don't really know who you're playing. I feel bad typically for the 6 seeds that do have to play a first 14 because typically one of them loses. Now imagine putting in half the 7 seeds, all of the 6 seeds, and maybe once in a while it's a 12 seed 12 match, and there's a 5 in there as well. Even the bubble's like as bad as this year, we could have that too. I think that just breeds disaster for all sides, and it just doesn't do anything. Like, it's nice watching the first 4, but don't make the first 4 a whole day, because that's basically what it would be. Like, that provides a random Tuesday to watch March Madness, which is cool. I'm glad for it, but I'd much rather stick with what we have right now and watch 2 games on Tuesday and Wednesday than watch like 6 or 6+ games or whatever it might be on those days. There's just no strategic purpose other than watch time. Like, I get it, that gets NCAA money, but it ruins a ton of programs in the process. Simple enough.
Yeah, I completely agree with the points you made. I just don't understand the logic behind adding more of the first 4 games. If it's a matter of money, I don't believe the first 4 games really do that well ratings-wise currently as it stands. And while we have gotten a couple decent first 4 games over the last couple seasons now, no one really watches them, if we're being completely honest. Everyone's attention is turned towards that first Thursday of the NCAA tournament, the real first day of the tournament, where you have all those games going on. I don't think anyone wants to feel that they're doing something wrong by not watching all the games, which may be going down on an expanded first 4.
On like True TV as well, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just not going to be there.
That's another thing too with the NCAA tournament. Can we talk about how, half these channels you can't get some of the time. It's just all over the place too. It's definitely I got a lot of bones to pick with the NCAA, but this is
Yeah, this
definitely one of
for
the
the
larger
sake
ones
of the
regarding.
video, I think it's just fair to talk about
Yeah,
this because the scheduling time on Saturday and Sunday was even worse than a lot of people were going to mention,
yeah.
but that's on
Yeah,
purpose.
that's another great point about the scheduling time locally. But yeah, to focus on expansion, I think there's no good reason to do it. It's very clear that the NCAA is money driven, as they are with most of their decisions they make. Conference realignment's another big thing. But yeah, I'm pretty firm. Keep it the way it is. Don't tamper with a product that is fine as it is and is, in my opinion, the best playoffs in all of sports. But let's move forward now to previewing the Sweet 16 slash second weekend of the NCAA tournament, primarily focusing on the Sweet 16 matchups that we're going to see beginning on Thursday and Friday, which will follow. But let's start off first in the East because people are calling this the toughest region of all time, the region of doom and despair. The coaching names Izzo, Patino, Self, who just obviously lost, Hurley, Shire. It's incredible. I don't know that I've ever seen this many national championship winning coaches, top flight coaches in the sport all mixed into one region. We can have the arguments about why, St. John's got screwed, Duke got screwed, why are the top two teams in a singular conference in the same region. But this is just the situation we found ourselves in. Duke takes on St. John's on Friday first before being followed by Michigan State and UConn. Both these games I expect to be incredible. I saw that I believe the East Regional this year in Washington, D.C. is the most expensive ever, with the cheapest ticket being $500. Let's begin with Duke St. John's because this matchup really, really intrigues me. You mentioned outside of Florida, Duke has probably looked the most shaky of any one seed this year. And St. John's is playing in their first Sweet 16 since 1999. Rick Pitino was coaching the Boston Celtics. Not a single player on the Johnny's roster was born yet. And here we are. They are in their first Sweet 16 in a very, very long time and have a honestly legit chance to take down the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about this off cam, and to shorten the argument for time's sake, I think that St. John's has a chance. It's not that high, maybe it's 30% chance in my opinion, but if they can keep Boozer down and prevent Nagamba from going off, I think it's more of a paint battle than anything else right now. And then if Dylan Darling plays off that momentum from his buzzer beater moment and is able to capitalize, I think there's definitely a chance. I think Duke wins this game, and they probably still win the region by beating the winner, Michigan State, UConn. On that point, I'll probably pick Michigan State just because they've looked like a better team. Although UConn has definitely grown in that UCLA win, they really showed off. But I just feel like this is Shire's conference or Shire's region to win. As hard as it will be, I think he has more than enough resources on his team to do it. And he's definitely grown into his own since last year. I think he's learned from his mistakes a good amount. And this team feels a lot more cleaner than it was last year.
Yeah, I also think Duke is probably my pick to come out of this region still, but I would not be surprised with Johnny's takedown Duke. Like you mentioned, Dylan Darling can definitely win that matchup against Caden Boozer. Zuby Ejiofor is going to be a problem. Yes, you got to deal with Cam Boozer, but Duke's got to deal with Zuby. I do worry that Zuby might get into foul trouble, both him and Dylan Mitchell, between having to guard Big Pat as well as Cam, because Cam gets a very, very friendly whistle, as most Duke superstars do. But hey, listen, Duke could definitely be bothered by the length and athleticism that St. John's possesses on the wing between Bryce Hopkins, Dylan Mitchell, their size, their physicality. And listen, this is probably the best coach Shire's ever gone up against in his coaching career. So we're going to really see how Shire handles that, because we have yet to really see John Shire make a true good in-game adjustment in a big game. And this is a very big game against one of the all-time greatest coaches, if not the best coach, at least to me, in Rick Pitino. So I'm really curious to see how Shire handles that task. I definitely think Rick Pitino could coach circles around Shire in this game, but Shire's got probably the better roster on paper. And I'm very, very excited for Friday to see this game go down. Michigan State's UConn, like you said, I think it going in probably favors Michigan State with how UConn just has not played well in terms of how well they've shot the ball from beyond the arc. Solo ball, Braylon Mullins just seemed to not be able to hit a shot right now. I do think Alex Caravan, at least getting close to replicating the performance he had against UCLA, is going to be key for UConn to be able to win and just being able to force Jackson Kohler to have to chase him around. But, Michigan State, they probably got the size edge. Jeremy Fears is incredible. Yeah, second team All-American, one of the top point guards in the country. And Kohler, Cooper, they're both physical. They got some depth. Some guys who give UConn some problems off the bench. It could really go either way in that one. Were there any other matchups that you want to highlight next in the Sweet 16?
Let's go down to the South region, which now is the only region without a 1 seed. We talked about Nebraska, Iowa. I will say Nebraska wins this game, but I really feel like the winner of this region comes from the Illinois-Houston game. This game will be taking
Yeah.
place minutes away from Houston's campus, but don't discredit Illinois. I'm still going to go with Houston. They were my original Final Four pick from this region, and I'm going to stick to where my money is. And I just feel like Houston hasn't had a threat yet. They haven't really been played anybody, but they played very well against A&M, who was pretty strong against a decent St. Mary's team. So if you want to put that in there, you can. I do think that they have the easiest path to the Final Four of any remaining non-1 seed, just because of, there's a good chance that if you beat Illinois, you're pretty much good to make the Final Four, but don't hold out on a very stringent Nebraska team. They are a dark horse team to make even a national championship game.
Completely agree. Nebraska, I think their defense is going to bother Iowa. And I just think against Florida, Iowa, Bennett Sturtz didn't play his greatest game. The other guys just really, really stepped up and honestly played out. Probably, I mean, most of those guys had an out-of-body experience with how well they played. We haven't really seen that for most of their players this year. It's going to be tough for them to replicate that. So I think Nebraska has the edge in that one, as you said. Houston, I expect to beat Illinois as well. I just don't think Illinois is potent enough on the defensive end of the floor. And following that, I mean, I would expect Houston to be able to take down Nebraska and get to Indianapolis. Let's head over now to the Midwest. Michigan, Alabama, Tennessee, Iowa State. I think me and Josh both believe Michigan is going to take down Bama pretty handedly. But I think the real talking point here is Tennessee, Iowa State. Tennessee upset Virginia in the second round and is one of the higher seeds left as a 6, but Iowa State's looked really good even in the absence of Joshua Jefferson. Now, do you worry that his absence is going to put Iowa State on upset watch when they go up against the Vols?
It's an up in the air question.
Yeah.
It really is, because Jacoby Gillespie has been popping.
Yeah, he's been on a different
He has
planet.
been on a completely different planet. And Rick Barnes has had this desire to make a Final Four. Tennessee's never made a Final Four. I don't think they can against Michigan, but you talk about it, and they could definitely beat a Joshua Jefferson-less Iowa State team. I'm not going to say they will, but I personally thought Virginia was going to beat Iowa State, so I don't really want to deny the opportunity there. I do think that Iowa State has rebounded very well. They did it very easily against Kentucky, and I'll be honest, Kentucky and Tennessee are not too different of a team. Like, Tennessee is only slightly better, so it might be a very similar experience. That said, though, the winner of this region will pretty much be Michigan. Like, I think that even if Joshua Jefferson is capable of playing against Michigan, which I don't think he will, but even if he is, I don't think Michigan loses, and I also don't think Michigan loses to Alabama. That's just a quick throw in for there, but I'm still going to stick with the Wolverines. They have probably the easiest path for a 1 seed right now to make it into the Final Four, but I'm not going to hold out actually on Tennessee. I think they have the second highest chance in this region. They are playing on
I definitely think
they're playing on some good momentum. That Virginia game really gave a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree with the points you made regarding Tennessee. There's a real world where they can upset Iowa State here, but I do have to say Iowa State, with how well Taman Lipsey and Momcilovic have played lately. I mean, Taman really took the game over down the stretch against the Wildcats. I think that they're probably going to get past Tennessee. That being said, though, I also agree that Michigan probably gets out of this region without too many battle scars, and then they'll find their way to Indianapolis as well. Now let's get on to the West region. Arizona, Arkansas. I don't think enough people are giving this game credit for how good it might end up being. Arkansas has been incredible offensively this tournament in their first 2 games between Hawaii and High Point. And let me just say they've struggled on the defensive end of the floor, which is something I think Arizona could take advantage of. But at the same time, if Arizona does not have a good shooting day, they could find themselves in a shootout with Arkansas.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think you said it best, but I'll repeat it. Best game of the Sweet 16. Hands down, best game. Coach Cal against an up-and-coming Tommy Lloyd. One of the best point guards we've ever seen in college basketball, and Darius Acuff, trying to make a name for himself even more than he already has, maybe cementing himself in that top 3 or NBA draft. I don't know where to lean right now. Arizona is likely going to be my national champion pick. They were originally, and I want to keep my Final Four the same because I haven't lost any of those teams. So I'm gonna pick Arizona not only to win this game, but to win the region against Purdue and for Texas. It'll probably end up being Purdue, and that is also a very underrated game. But I think the way that Arkansas plays is just too volatile. Like, yes, they will be shooting the three ball way more efficiently than Arizona, and that could definitely doom the Wildcats. But at the same time, the interior defense that you're going to get from Krivas and Pete is just going to be too much. Like, I like Malik Ewan. I like Trayvon Brazil. I just don't see them being able to muster up the strength to beat them in the paint, and I think that's where Arizona is going to just thrive. I do think that Brain Berries will be very easily outmatched by his counterpart in Darius Acuff, but who's going to go on Bradley? That's the real question. I think he's going to have free reign in a game like this, and that should really be what keeps Arizona alive. And for the Purdue game's sake, that's also a pretty tough one. I do think that Purdue stands a great chance at beating Arizona. They have an opportunity to go literally like 30 minutes away from campus in Indy to play in the Final Four. But I just feel like the resolve that you're going to get from this Arizona team, possibly coming off of this win, will be probably too much. And Arizona is they're just a taller team. They're a taller team. They fought way harder. And I just don't know if they could be stopped. I think the only team that really could stop them before the Final Four is, Arkansas.
Yeah, I want to preface, Darius Acuff leads the tournament scoring right now. He's been stellar between the two games they played so far, but High Point highlighted him as a weakness on Arkansas's defensive game plan, and he needs to be better. Acuff has to defend at a higher level if Arkansas wants any legit chance of winning this game. You mentioned they are completely outmatched in height, and I expect it to be a lot tougher for Arkansas to be able to score the way they have against both Hawaii and High Point as well. So they got to get stops. You got to look to Travion Brazil, Billy Richmond, or Billy Goat, as Coach Cal likes to call him, Malik Thomas. They got to buckle up and strap in on the defensive end of the floor because Arizona, you can't let them hit 3-point shots. I know they don't take a lot, but if they're knocking down shots, you let DeLorso, Burries get going like Burries got going the other night. You're in a really bad spot because they're going to pound you down low on the glass and in the paint. The high-low action between Pete and Krivas, we're probably going to see a lot of. So you got to win. You got to win on the defensive on the floor. If Arkansas comes out and plays good defense, there's a really, really good chance they can win this game. But right now, I'm sticking with my national champion pick that I've had for quite a while now. I'm sticking with the Wildcats, Arizona. I don't want to. While I do kind of want to lean at Arkansas here, I'm not going against Arizona right now.
Yeah.
Texas, I think, is a unique game. I definitely do worry for Purdue's sake regarding the injury status of CJ Cox, who I would assume gets the point of attack on Dalen Swain. I think Dalen Swain is a complete matchup problem for the Boilermakers between the height he has and just his ISO scoring ability against a team in the Boilermakers that have not been very good on that end of the floor this season. I could see Jakari Harris or Omer Meyer, who Josh threw out to me earlier before we start recording, as someone or two people who could end up seeing that assignment should CJ Cox not be available for this game. But I still would expect Purdue's front court to completely outmatch Texas's, and they should be able to get to the Elite Eight, where I still think Arizona comes out of this region.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty simple one to say. And for the Final Four sake, we're keeping our same Final Four from the start of the tournament. Like we said, no one lost, so no one really needed to be removed. I do think there might be a small change up in who I have in the national championship game. I still think Arizona beats Michigan. I'm probably more resolved in that now more than ever. But the Duke and Houston matchup scares me on Duke's sake. I had Duke winning this game. I think I might flip it just because Houston has played with a lot more vigor and they have not had any close game opportunities. And I don't think that they will unless they obviously lose to Illinois. Duke can definitely get better in the Final Four, and they might have Caleb Foster by then, but I don't think it's going to matter. I really feel like Houston has that chip on their shoulder that they need to cleanse right then and right now, and they did it against Duke last year. Let's see them do it again.
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, this tournament's been chalky, but like last year, the good teams got to play each other eventually, and that is what we are getting in the second weekend. Super pumped and excited for the matchups to come. Obviously, be on the lookout for a coaching carousel video that should be coming out pretty soon, as well as some recaps following the second weekend and previewing the Final Four. But that's going to take care of everything that we had for you guys on this episode today. And until the next one, we'll see you all next time.